Hi, I'm Larry Magid of CBS News. I had an opportunity to sit down with Sam Liang, who's the co-founder and CEO of Otter, a company which has a free app for Android, iOS, and the web that will transcribe audio into text automatically and in real time. In fact, if you want to follow along or just read the transcript of this interview, you can do so at larrysworld.com. Because I used Otter to transcribe both the raw interview in real time and the edited interview that you're listening to. We began by having him tell me what Otter is and how it's different from other speech recognition engines that you might know from the likes of Google, Amazon, and Apple.
Otter is a mobile app and a web application that transcribe human voice conversations. So this is very different than Siri or Alexa or Google Home. They handle a conversation between a human being and a robot. Mm-hmm. You can ask a short question like, what's the weather tomorrow? And the robot will answer that question. However, Otter is doing something totally different. It listens to human conversations and transcribe the conversation in real time. You can also upload an old recording to Otter. It will also transcribe it. In addition, it's able to recognize different speakers' voice and separate them properly. It uses new technology called diarization and speaker ID.
What's the first technology?
Diarization is a technology to separate one person's voice from another speaker's voice.
So I would imagine, for example, that it knows your voice, but it's never met me before. How will it know when it transcribes this podcast that you're speaking or I'm speaking?
When it hears a new person, it doesn't know the identity of the person, but it does know it's a new person. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the recording, you can tag a segment of the speech and you tell it, this is Larry. Mm-hmm. And the technology in the cloud will create a voice profile or a voice print similar to your fingerprint conceptually, which can be used to match the rest of the recording.
Okay.
So
similar to the way, for example, Google and Apple recognize faces, similar to facial recognition. Once it knows this is what Larry looks like, from then on, any photograph of Larry, it's going to
absolutely. It's very conceptually very similar to face recognition. Yeah, Once exactly. You label a few faces, it's able to remember that.
So if I were to record, let's say, a debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, would it, because they're famous, would it know their voices, for example, or could it?
It could. Because they have a lot of a public speech recording, we can easily download their speech in advance and label their voices in advance and create their voice print in advance. So when they are engaging in a debate, the system actually is able to recognize their voice in real time as well. Although right now the real-time speaker ID recognition is not available in the current product yet.
Right. And what are some of the practical applications of the technology?
We see a very broad range of applications. Obviously, for reporters, they do a lot of interviews. Yeah. So this definitely helps them a lot. Traditionally, you have to spend $1 per minute for a human being to transcribe it for you. Wow. And turnaround time could be slow. With Otter, you can get it instantly.
So we're recording this in real time. As we're conducting this podcast, I can actually see our words on the screen. But I've got hundreds of podcasts and broadcasts on my hard drive. Can I go back and retroactively transcribe those?
Absolutely. It's very easy to upload the old podcast onto the website. It's called Otter.ai. Once you log in, there is a import button. You can use that button to import all your old podcasts.
As I recall, Dragon Systems, for example, which is a very good speech recognition, It does well when you're talking into it, but it doesn't do that well, for example, when you load an old recording. Is that your understanding of previous technologies?
I think they can do old recording too, but the accuracy is very different. Nuance has been doing this for 20 years, but they are actually lagging behind in the last few years because their technology is pretty old. The new technologies are all based on deep learning. So that's what we have created in the last few years.
But could you use this, for example, if you wanted to just write a letter and have it transcribed as opposed to doing what we're doing today?
Yeah, for that purpose is usually called dictation.
Right.
Dictation is one person tries to use voice to write a letter or email. Otter can definitely support that. Actually, it supports that very well. However, Otter actually does something even more difficult than dictation. When people dictate, they usually speak a little slower and more clearly. But when people are engaged in a conversation with another human being or several other speakers, they speak much faster.
But I could imagine, for example, let's say I'm riding in a car or I'm in an airplane. I have this great idea that I want to write down. I could just go ahead and load Otter and use it for that purpose and speak my idea, and I'd have a record of a transcription of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's not the main purpose, but you could use it that way.
We actually just saw a YouTube video yesterday. Somebody said, "I'm using Otter to write a book."
Sure.
When they're walking their dog, they're actually writing a book using Otter.
Exactly. Does it transcribe barking, by the way, if the dog is participating in the conversation?
Unfortunately, we're not able to understand dogs barking yet, but eventually with deep learning, you could.
You'll figure that one out.
Yeah, when a dog barks, what does he mean? Is he hungry or is
There actually are people working on that very problem. But seriously, what's unique about this, I think, is the fact that it does allow for a group conversation. So, for example, if I were at a conference and there was a panel and a number of people were speaking, I could essentially transcribe every one of those speakers at the panel, and ultimately we would know who the speaker was. It would actually label their names once I trained it to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. We have actually done that many times already ourselves. In addition, we actually used the product ourselves in our own company. We actually record all our project meetings, marketing, interviews. So we actually eat our own dog food.
Yeah.
All our company meetings are in the Otter system.
And so you have a transcript of who said what at all of your meetings.
Yeah,
when somebody had a great idea and someone else takes credit for it, it's not going to work.
Right. Sometimes the people have a different interpretation about about somebody's opinion, and we can always go back and listen to it again.
Mm-hmm.
And
I see. In other words, if you don't, for whatever reason, don't trust the transcript, you can go back and get the actual audio.
Yeah, both the audio and transcript is available, and when you play it back, the audio and transcript is synchronized word by word.
So I saw that on the website. So just so the audience knows, this operates on iOS, on Android, and then there's a web app, which I presume operates on all web browsers, right? Mac, Windows, whatever.
Yes.
And I did notice that on the web, I could play back an audio simultaneously while reading the transcript, which was really great because I did find in one of my, I actually uploaded an audio portion of one of my broadcasts, one of my Ion Tech broadcasts, and I found one or two mistakes. But when I listened to it, I could see exactly what I had said.
Yeah.
And that's true if you listen to it on the phone as well?
It does the same thing on the phone.
Yeah.
It works on iPhone, Android, as you mentioned, any web browser on PC or Macintosh. The engine, we built the speech recognition engine all by ourselves. We're not using Google Voice meetings.
So just to review, this is a free app that runs on iOS and Android. Anybody can get it just from the Play Store. Search for Otter. Is that what Otter?
Otter in App Store on iPhone or in Google Play Store on Android.
Or you can go to Otter.ai. That's how you get it, and you can use it on the web as well. So, for example, if there's a YouTube video, for example, or a television program, or a Netflix show that you would like a transcription of, if you had the MP3 file, you could load it in. If you didn't, I suppose you could run the Otter app and simply listen through the speaker and get a transcription?
Yes, yes, you
But then, of
can.
course, now I have to ask you about privacy. You used to work for Google, so you understand the complexity. In fact, I know that you used to work on Google Maps, and that's an example of a wonderful product that I use every day, which has enormous privacy implications. It strikes me that this product is also quite useful, but it brings up some interesting privacy implications as well.
Yeah, we definitely take privacy extremely seriously. We see this as a personal tool, and the user owns the data himself. Whenever the user wants to delete the data, we erase everything absolutely. We're not going to sell the data for advertisement. We have a freemium model so that we make money from the user subscription and also for enterprises. So we don't want to sell the data.
Now, speaking of law, state law varies as to whether you're allowed to record a phone call with only one person knowing. For example, I think in New York it is legal to, because I know this from the Michael Cohen case, I believe it's legal to record a call and not disclose it to the other person. In California, you're required to disclose it. But either way, it might be useful to have a transcript of your phone calls. Is that a possibility with this technology?
It can. You can record phone calls as long as you tell the other guy you're doing it.
And does the technology, does the app allow that on both iOS and Android?
On iOS, you cannot record a phone call on the same iPhone. You could use another phone or use a PC or a MacBook to record the phone call when you have it on speakerphone. On Android, it's technically possible to record a phone call on the same Android phone.
You and I have different accents, but of course there are many other accents. Is that an issue for some speakers where it's harder for them to understand their voice?
It does make the speech recognition engine more difficult to build. However, with the deep learning technology we are building, we actually collected a lot of different speeches with different accents and trained the engine to teach it how to do the mapping between different accents to the English words. So specifically, in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of Indian engineers and Chinese engineers. So specifically, we did a lot of enhancement and training for Chinese accent and Indian accent. But in addition to that, there are UK accents from Britain, from Australia, even in Southern America. People have different accents. So we have, on the internet, there are a lot of public speech. We crawl and use that to train the speech recognition.
And of course,
engine.
also people with speech impediments. I imagine you could eventually get to the point where you could transcribe virtually any speech, right?
Right. But if somebody has, very different pronunciation, different pace or style, it could do personal training as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right now, it's for the general public.
And then the other thing that excites me about this technology is simultaneous translation. The ability, for example, I go to a lot of conferences that are sponsored by the UN, and they have very high-skilled people who not only translate it in real time, but also put it up on the screen in real time. I'm always amazed how they can do that. But I presume we could get to a point where I could be speaking in English and my words could be in French or Chinese or Spanish or Arabic on a screen in real time as I'm speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. We already transcribed the sound and speech into English words, and we can easily use another API to translate it into Spanish or Mandarin or Japanese and show that in real time as well.
Well, Sam, speaking of time, we've run out of it. This was great. And of course, as I mentioned, there is a transcript of this entire conversation at larrysworld.com. So if you go to Larry's World, you'll find both the audio and a transcript of the conversation. Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.